Good evening and welcome to the public who are watching at home, as well as our delegations who are here tonight. I'm calling to order the February 9th council meeting, regular meeting of council, and we are beginning at 6:01 p.m. At this time, I'd like to confirm the agenda. Are there any emergent items from any of the councillors? And seeing and hearing none, I'll turn to administration. Jonathan?
Thank you, Your Worship. Administration is requesting that council remove item 16.2, medical services, advice from officials, VoIP section 24(1)A from the agenda.
Thank you. Then at this time, I'm looking for a motion to confirm the agenda as amended. Councillor Langley, thank you for that motion. I'll call the question. All in favor? And I'll just double check. Councillor Mitzner, are you with us? I don't see her or hear her. Okay, so we have 6 here tonight as of this time, as of this point. Thank you. As far as recognitions, there is something that I would like to read on behalf of Town of Strathmore and Strathmore Town Council. We would like to start this evening by extending our sincere condolences to the family, friends, and colleagues of firefighter Stephen Rayfield of the Castor Fire Department, who was killed in the line of duty on the evening of February 4th, 2022. The men and women of today's fire service are confronted with more dangerous work environments than ever before. Although this is the case, they continually answer the call to save lives and protect property, and sometimes, like this, at a terrible cost. We will honor Stephen by flying our flags at the Strathmore Fire Department at half-mast, and will provide assistance to the family in the coming days as the details are made public. I will now ask for a moment of silence for our fallen firefighter, Stephen Rayfield. Thank you. I also want to take a moment on behalf of Strathmore Town Council and the town of Strathmore to reflect on the loss of 3 Siksika Nation members in a house fire this past weekend. This is a devastating tragedy for their community, and we offer our condolences to the friends and families of those affected. Please know that your neighbors in the town of Strathmore are here to support and comfort you during this difficult time. Thank you. We have no public comments tonight. And as far as delegations in section 5, we have the Calgary Zone EMS operations. And whoever is here, I believe we have some of you on screen, some aren't on screen. If you could just identify yourselves and we can start with your presentation. Good evening and welcome to the Town of Strathmore's public meeting for February 9th.
Thank you, Your Worship. We appreciate it. My name is Randy Bricks. I'm the Associate Executive Director for EMS Operations in the Calgary Zone. We'll be providing a brief presentation to you tonight and then really open it up to questions. And that's what we really want, is a dialogue with you and your councillors. I'm going to introduce my team, if that's okay, Your Worship. I'll just spend the time. Curtis, feel free to start.
Good evening. My name is Curtis Swanson. I'm the Director for Operations in the Calgary Zone, and I will be doing the presentation this evening.
Thank you, Curtis. I have Chris Baker, our manager. Go ahead, Chris.
Good evening, everybody. Yeah, my name is Chris Baker, and I'm the manager up in District 3 in the Calgary Zone, which encompasses Strathmore and area. And I'm here to assist with potentially any questions that may come up that are at a local level for sure.
Thank you, Chris. Councillors and your worship, thank you for the time today. We appreciate it. It's been long overdue, and I'm going to put it out there right to begin with. We are going to be, we'd like to be a regular for you going forward, to both yourself and your council on a regular basis, so that we can keep you apprised of the challenges EMS is facing and some of the mitigation strategies we're bringing into play. So thank you for the time today. Curtis, I'll pass it over to you. Curtis will provide a brief presentation. Takes about 10 minutes, and then we'll open it up to questions, if that's okay with you, Your Worship.
Yes, it is. Thank you very much.
Okay, Curtis, over to you.
Thank you very much. Is it okay if I share my screen to do the presentation, or do you have the presentation?
That would be great. That way the public can see it at home as well.
Okay. Let me know if you can see.
Yep, you see the first page, community engagement.
Okay, perfect. Well, thank you very much, and really appreciate you having us out here today. Like Randy said, this is long overdue, and this evening we're going to have a quick presentation to kind of give some higher level stats, and then we'll open it up for a dialogue that you can ask any questions. Our objectives today is to kind of go over our goals. We want to present some data, which is the EMS resources in Strathmore. We want to talk about call volumes in Strathmore. We also want to talk about all the other ambulance services that would support Strathmore, community area services by Strathmore ambulances. Where does Strathmore transport to? We're going to talk about response times, and then we're going to be transparent about our current challenges, some mitigation strategies, and listen to you for any other questions or any other comments, because we're all in this together, and we need your advice as well. The purposes of this is to engage through renewed dialogue. This is one thing that, as Randy was saying, during COVID, it seemed like everything shut down. And so we want to share information about EMS. We want to address our concerns to our community stakeholders. And we want to look for opportunities for improvements. Like Randy said, we're committed to coming out to council and do presentations, but we want to open up opportunities that we don't need to wait for presentations or council meetings to answer any of your questions. And so we'll be passing that on to everybody, that if you have questions, please give us a call and we can try to answer them in real time. EMS resources in Strathmore. Strathmore currently has one 24-hour life support ambulance and two Coreflex BLS ambulances. It's supported by Strathmore District Health Services, Medical First Response to the Strathmore Fire, which we're thankful for all our medical first responders who assist us on our daily duties. STARS responds out to Strathmore. And we have community AEDs, which when I look at the number, it says we have 3 AEDs registered in Strathmore. I would put that out there to, if you have a list of all your AEDs, let's make sure that they're included in heartsafe.ca, because what happens with that is if a call comes in that requires an AED, then dispatch will be aware of it and will tell the whoever calls in to go grab the closest AED. So if you have more than 3 AEDs in town, we can work with you to get them set up, so when an emergency does come in, we can look for the closest AED before EMS gets there. So I'm just going to fix the screen. Our call volume in Strathmore, this is from April 1st, 2020 to March 31st. It's our fiscal year. It remains, and this is calls in the town of Strathmore. If you look at every quarter, it does remain pretty stable. Nothing's really jumped out for us from quarter to quarter. We do know that when we will pull the numbers again this year, that we have seen globally in EMS a 30% increase in call volume, which we'll talk to in some of our strategies and some of our challenges. EMS ambulances serving Strathmore. So these are the ambulance services that come into Strathmore to do the call. So Strathmore EMS does 84% of the calls within Strathmore. Then the next is Calgary comes into Strathmore at 11, Siksika or Chestermere at 1%, and Siksika at 1%. community areas serviced by the Strathmore ambulance. So Strathmore, the total calls is 55% in Strathmore. 25% of the total calls, they come into Calgary. Wheatland is 7% and Siksika is 6%. Top destinations for Strathmore ambulance, 50% stays right in community and 49% has to be transported into Calgary to one of the variety adult or children's hospital. 0.3 to Vulcan and 0.2 to Bassano. EMS response times for Strathmore. Our goal is a provincial goal. It depends on the size of the community. And in Strathmore, our goal for life-threatening, that's a Delta Echo of responses, is 10 minutes on the 50th, so the median, or 15 minutes on the 90th. And if you look over the last 4 years, we have the data here, which shows it's gone from 2016 to 6 minutes and 10:49 to 2020, 6:45, 54 to 15:40. And then this year to date, we have seen an increase, which again, we'll talk about in some of our challenges, is that we have seen an increase, and that's gone to 7 minutes and 14 seconds. And so we're below the average on the 50th, and then we're above the average on the 90th. This is where we're going to talk about some of our challenges and some of the strategies that we're facing right now. Like we talked about, EMS has seen a 30% increase in call volume. This is not just a Calgary zone problem. This is not just an Alberta problem. This is North America wide, where, during COVID and as COVID was lifting in different stages, we've seen a 30% increase. And we believe that this is going to continue to happen. We don't think that this is just a COVID reaction, but that we'll continue to see a 30% increase in call volume. So what are we doing about it? We know that some of our challenges is the amount of IFTs, interfacility transfers, EMS transporting from community into the adult sites. So we're looking at different ways of being more efficient with that. We know some of our transfers that we do, that it's not a patient, it's somebody that would need a ride. And so we want to make sure that they have the appropriate transportation, whether it's to a clinic or whether it's even to home. And so we're looking at family and taxis to be able to make some of these transport. If it is a patient, then EMS will gladly do the transfer. This is one of the projects that was developed from government. It was a trial at the Peter Lougheed Hospital and the North Zone. And we just got approval to do this trial within the Calgary zone. So we'll be working with your local hospital and EMS to look at how we can be more efficient with our transfers. We're also triaging low acuity events so we can put them on high acuity calls. If a lower acuity event comes in, the dispatch will triage it, we'll put them on hold and make sure that we get to the higher acuity call. One of the other things that's not on the list about increased event volumes, and I'll get Randy to speak on it, is 2 years ago, we did an hours of work project throughout the whole province where we looked at everyone's hours and looking to see if we could make any changes due to the capacity and the demand on the system. But Randy, would you like to speak on the hours of work?
Sure, thanks, Curtis. This is a project that's been ongoing for a couple of years. We've got 12 million in this fiscal year and another 12 million in the upcoming fiscal year, in the 2022-23 fiscal year for HS, allocated to looking at fatigue across the zone, specifically in areas where we have core flex resources. So currently, as Curtis has mentioned, the ambulance service out of your community currently has one what we call assembled crew 24 hours a day, 365, but they have two core flex crews in which they have to be on duty for a certain amount of time, then they're on call to respond to emergencies. What we're changing, and we're working with Rob, is we are going to change that. We're going to increase the second resource to an assembled crew. So it'll be another ambulance, 360 or 24 hours a day, 365. So it'll be broken into 12-hour shift patterns. And then the third ambulance is going to be changing from a core flex to a Monday through Friday resource, 8 hours a day. So in all, you should see an increase in the capacity and availability of your resources. This is, again, I want to remind people, phase one. There is potential for further change down the road, and we are currently working with Rob to implement this in the upcoming weeks. So a very positive thing. It's a good news story that we have, and we see it as a positive thing to make sure that our staff are not fatigued and they are available to community on a regular basis in a what we call an assembled resource versus the core flex, where they're on a period of call back into the system. Thanks, Curtis.
Thanks, Randy. One of our second challenges, and I'd probably say it's one of our biggest challenges over the last 15 years, is EMS is stuck in the hospitals. We transport, and this is common for Strathmore. Strathmore transports into Calgary Hospital, and because of how busy the system is, we end up waiting in the hallway for an extended period of time. So we're working hard with our partners in health and really trying to raise the awareness of the impact of EMS waiting in the hallway. We constantly meet with the teams to try to look at different strategies. And one of the strategies we're coming up with is this integrated operations center, which they have something similar in Edmonton. This IOC is like the air traffic control of the healthcare system. It's going to be the eye in the sky for every part of input, throughput, and output of the hospital system. So we can try to address some of our challenges for EMS being in the hospital. One of the other things that we've done with hospital waits is that we've increased our transports to the urgent care centers. This has been a successful project that we started in August, where we were looking at how we can do alternative transports. And we transport to the urgent cares, which is there's 5 urgent cares in the Calgary zone. But what we've done is we've made awareness. We've worked with our partners at the urgent cares, and we've actually increased our transports to the urgent cares by about an average of 45% since August. The good news for that is we have about a 45-minute quicker turnaround time at the urgent care than what we do at the adult sites. I don't see Strathmore very much going to the urgent care. There is one in Airdrie, but we, again, looking at overall systems and how we can increase our deal with our prolonged hospital waits. The third issue that we have is fluctuating EMS staffing levels. Our staff are burnt out. They're tired, like all healthcare. We know that it's hit COVID pretty hard for all of us, and we're not immune to the COVID. And so we have some days that we have some challenges with staffing. And so we're hiring full-time and casual staff on a regular basis. We're also attempting to put on extra resources in Calgary on a regular basis to hope to keep the suburban rural, to stay in suburban rural and not to have to come in as much into Calgary. Which goes into our fourth challenge, suburban rural resources coming into the city. This is something that we've heard loud and clear from suburban rural areas, that suburban rural comes into Calgary to either cover, they'll come into Calgary to do a call, or transport a patient, and then they can't get out of Calgary. That's leaving some suburban rural resources, EMS, out of the suburban rural towns. Good news is, over the last couple of weeks, we've been doing a soft rollout of how we dispatch suburban rural and keeping a priority of keeping some trucks in the rural areas at all times. This officially got launched this Monday. And as the soft rollout came, and I just looked at the stats before, Strathmore has come in this last week about a quarter of the time that they did on the yearly average. So the yearly average used to be 40 times a week that Strathmore used to come into Calgary. And last week we were just around 10 times that Strathmore came into Calgary. So we're going to be watching how ambulances are being dispatched. And again, this should significantly benefit our suburban rural, which would benefit, obviously, Strathmore. Sorry, my computer is frozen. I think that was the last page anyways.
I think
Yeah, that's the last slide.
Yeah, your next page goes on to discussion and questions.
Okay, well, thank you, Your Honor, Your Worship. We'll open up for any questions or comments, and we'll do our best to answer anything. And if we can't answer it, we'll definitely come back with any answers.
Thank you. And just before we start with questions, I believe we did invite Rob Whitty from Wedemsa, and I believe he is online or on his phone. There he is. So Rob, we have you here. Is there anything you would like to add on behalf of Wedemsa to what you've seen and heard in the presentation tonight? And then we can start with councillor comments and councillor questions. I see you walking, but I think you're muted. Okay, I think you're on mute, Rob. If you can hear me, you're muted. Thank you.
There we go. Sorry. Thank you very much for the invite, Your Worship. Again, I don't have a whole lot to add to the delegation's presentation from Randy and Curtis. Everything they said is pretty much in line with what we have. Our numbers are a little bit different, and I think basically they broke down responses just for the Strathmore area, which would be pertinent to this presentation. Our call volumes are actually a fair bit higher. That being said, the last comment about the soft rollout of the resources being pulled into Calgary, we certainly have seen a decrease of our crews being called in over the last couple of weeks. And the fact that it officially started Monday, there certainly has been a decrease in that. And I've seen our crews around a lot more. So far, the early successes certainly will benefit our community, and look forward to seeing how that rolls out over coming months.
Thank you, Rob. And so there's nothing else you wanted to add? That's good.
Yeah, I think that's good. And if there's any questions that I can answer, certainly
Sure.
that.
Okay. Thank you very much. Just before I turn to councillors, I had one question, and if council can turn to page 9. And the question I have is, I'm looking at your percentiles, and I think the one that jumps off the page at me is the 2021 year to date. And the 90th percentile response interval is 19 minutes and 27 seconds. So if I follow that correctly, and correct me if I'm wrong, does that mean 1 in 10 calls would be taking longer than 19 minutes and 27 seconds? Because if that's the case, that's very disturbing.
Your Worship, it's Randy. Yes, what we acknowledge for this year, we're having challenges in at our 90th percentile. What we're seeing is when we review the data, the most common cause is that all the resources assigned to that start and stop out of that community are actually out either on responses or in other communities providing care. Which is why we implemented what Curtis and Rob spoke about, was the processes to keep suburban rural resources in community. To add to that, as Curtis said, for the averaging about 40 per week coming in over the last year, what we've seen over the last 3 weeks is 3 weeks ago, you were coming, the Strathmore resources were coming into Calgary 22 times, so almost half. 2 weeks ago, 19 times, and then last week, 12 times. That was based on the soft rollout, and we knew we were going to have success here. We'll see and continue to monitor that. But to your point, are we concerned? Absolutely. And that's why we're here today, to talk to you about it and talk about some of the strategies that we feel will be successful to keep your resources in the community where they should be starting.
Okay, thank you. And my last question, and then I'll turn to Councillor Wagoner and Deputy Mayor Montgomery, is you talked about new hiring staff, full-time and casual. Is that to complement the existing staff level, or is that just replacing people?
A great question, and the answer is it's to replace existing resources. So we had a total of 100 throughout the province hired specifically to this zone. We had 35 that we hired. 15 went into metro operations, or the city of Calgary full-time, and the other 20 went into our suburban, rural, and interfacility transport operations. That's specifically to AHS resources. And then we've spoken to you about what's coming with the hours of work related to the additional hirings coming into specifically with DEMSA.
Okay, and those ones specifically to ADEMS, are they to complement the staff we already have or just replacing staff again?
They're to complement. It's a combination of using existing resources and augmenting your existing resources, because we're going to move them from a core flex perspective to a assembled crew 12-hour shift pattern.
Okay, thank you. I'll go now to Councillor Wegener, followed by Deputy Mayor Montgomery.
Good evening, and Curtis and crew, thank you very much for your presentation. I have a few questions here. You did answer a few of them for me, and I appreciate that, and thank you for coming. Now, one of the things that was mentioned, and Rob alluded to it, with the call volume, that's for the town of Strathmore, which is fine, which is who we represent, but it's not really indicative of who the ambulance service represents, or throughout the county of Wheatland. That impacts everybody when they're out on calls in the county. So with that in mind, I just a few questions.
Sure.
I think it may relate to your suburban rural initiative that you were talking about. Maybe you can answer this, I'm not sure. I'm hearing that a lot of the rural ambulances are being rerouted from their communities into Calgary, and most likely Edmonton as well. And the reason I've heard that they're doing that is they're being rerouted in there to cut down on the overtime in the city. Is that a fair statement, or is that somewhat correct?
So I can answer this, Randy.
Go ahead, Curtis. Yep.
Councillor Wagner, a lot of times when the crews get called into Calgary, it's to do an event or for coverage. In the Calgary zone, we have opened it up for overtime and our casual shifts to fill our staffing levels. But as we talked about, 42% or 42 times on average, Strathmore would come into Calgary. And that's to either cover, to do a call, or after they've done a call, they do another call. And that's because we've had a 30% of increase in call volume, and because a lot of our crews are stuck in the hospital. And so it's basically they just can't get out of Strathmore. And that's what this initiative is doing right now, is basically trying to keep Strathmore in community. And even if on that data, when we talk about the 90th percentile on some of our challenges, if we go back even 6 weeks ago, Strathmore came into Calgary 72 times, which is significant, which leaves communities uncovered. And that's because the whole system is busy, like I said, with the 30% call volume. We hope with this initiative, as we saw last week, 12 times, it's pretty significant less of Calgary or of Strathmore or any other suburban rural resources coming in. The other change that we have is that we would send, Strathmore could get put on a call in Calgary, and we know that they might not ever get there. So that's some of the different dispatches. They won't be dispatched unless they happen to be the only truck for life-threatening in Calgary, but we're not sending them on any other events into Calgary like we did up to 2 weeks ago. So that's going to help with the 90th percentile because, like we said, a difference of 60 times coming in 1 week is significant. And I really believe and Rob can maybe speak on it more, with the core flex, we had units that would time out on a regular basis. And so by having this assembled truck, the extra resources that are coming in, that's really going to support Rob and his crews to not have any timed out resources compared to what we had timed out currently. And Rob, I don't have the numbers, but I know from talking with your team that was some of the challenges of some of your resources timing out because they would be coming into Calgary. Does that answer your question, Councillor Wagner?
Yes, it does. Thank you. And then relating to slide 7, where you had the various levels or percentages of calls. with Wheatland Ambulance, like I say, 55% of the calls, I can see that. But Wheatland County, that was at, I think 7% or something like that. Why is that so low? And again, I think you explained to me why Calgary is so high. And just one more thing with that, when you add the percentages up together, it comes to 93%. Where does that other 7% go?
So when we pull the data, we'll take the top 4 sites. That's common. We don't go into the, we only pick the top 4. So that's where the other 7% would go into that. And you're right, the 25% is into Calgary, which again, we hope to assist or fix with this new initiative. And then 7% into the suburban rural. I don't have much detail on, into the Wheatland County. I don't have much detail on who's all doing the events into Wheatland County. And I apologize, I don't have that info on me today.
And that is fine. Again, Curtis, thank you. And just one more thing, not a question. Again, most of my questions have been answered. The other day, I was at the Wheatland Lodge, and I was given a letter by one of the residents there who, well, here's what she said. On the particular day at 2 a.m., she had a fall in the facility that required medical attention. The staff was helping with her as best they could, doing what they could do. At 3 a.m., an ambulance did show up from Bazano. And again, you've explained a lot of this to us. For a lady who is in her late 80s, a 60-minute wait again is kind of unacceptable. I mean, for me, it's an unacceptable time while this lady was there suffering. And again, hopefully that with all this stuff that you guys are planning, hopefully this is kind of a thing of the past. But again, it should it have been if the incident would have progressed or been a little more serious, it's possible that she could have died. So there was some upset people at the lodge regarding this, and a lot of my questions seem negative towards you guys. I don't, if that's the vibe I'm giving off, I don't mean it. I just have questions that I would like answered, and you guys are doing a great job with answering them so far.
Councillor Wagner, it's Randy. If I may, we're deeply concerned, and I think that's what I want you to hear. My staff and the staff with DEMSA work hard every day to try and provide a service based under very difficult circumstances. Obviously, the pandemic has challenged us more. But to your point, and this is what we're trying to get the story out, our normal increase in event volumes is 6 to 8%, right? Since March of last year, we've seen a 30% increase in event volumes, and that's been sustained, and we believe it's our new norm. That's the challenge we're facing. It's unprecedented. And as Curtis said, I can't explain why, but this is an international phenomenon. All EMS systems are facing the same challenges. What we are doing is we don't profess to have all the answers here. So we're actually reaching out to our Canadian partners, our international partners, and saying, what strategies are you even doing? So we're sharing that because this has caught everybody by surprise, especially with that drastic of an increase. And I don't want to make excuses here. So that's not our intent. Our intent is to relay the information to you, to say we are well aware of it, and to actually say we want to put strategies in place to mitigate it because we are concerned. Lastly, sorry, and I'll comment on the data. That's my fault. You can put that on me. We were told we were speaking specifically to Strathmore. We are more than happy to share the county information, and we know that our numbers will mesh with Rob's at that point. So we're more than happy to share that. And if you'd like that after, I'll be more than happy to get it to you guys.
And Randy, again, thank you for your answer. No, that is fine. I actually got the numbers from Rob. I just wanted to make it known that this is the town and the county are both represented here through Wheatland EMS. And I appreciate the challenges that you guys are facing. I appreciate the job that you guys are doing. God, I wouldn't want it. I just like I say, everything I've heard tonight sounds really good. The strategies that you have in place sound great. I'm hoping that I'm optimistic. I'm sure we'll see some improvements. It's just like I say, there's issues right now, and
Yep.
and that and I wanted to kind of get them off my chest, off what I've heard, and I'm confident that things are going to get better. So I really appreciate you guys being here tonight. Thank you very much, and that's all the questions that I have.
Thank you,
Councillor
Councillor.
Langley. Deputy Mayor Montgomery and Councillor Langley is on deck.
Thank you very much. And thank you for this presentation. And also, I really appreciate the work you guys are doing to look for solutions and to try to make things more efficient, especially, like I understand you guys have limited resources and so you're trying to do better with those resources. One question I have just has to do with the prioritization or triaging of calls that come in. Do you guys let people know if they've been kind of triaged to a lower priority?
Great question, Jason, if I may call you that, Councillor.
Yep.
Yes, so I'll explain the process. This process was implemented on January the 7th, where we triage low acuity events. What we do is after the initial call, they get a determinant, which is basically called in our world is an alpha event, which means it's a low acuity call. It's not saying we won't send an ambulance. We just may not send an ambulance immediately because we want to make sure we have resources available for higher priority events. So that call goes into a queue, okay? And when we have sufficient resources, we send it out. What we do then is that call at the 15-minute mark, a call back to the caller is done. And it's actually a physician that's calling back, our physician in dispatch, who is calling back, and they interview the caller or the third person who called on behalf of the patient to see if there's any change. At that point, we do a review every hour thereafter, okay? Now, I would like to say some calls aren't held for up to an hour, but in fairness, they are. And again, based on an assessment, not only by our emergency communication officers, but they are also done by a physician in dispatch. So that's a mitigation strategy. That's a short-term solution. I'm going to be completely honest. The concern I have is that, again, this is only going to be sustainable for a period of time. And that's to your point, is that we need to make sure that not only do we have short-term solutions, but we need long-term solutions in place. And primarily those long-term solutions are going to come for a focus on dealing with the flow in the hospitals. We don't control that. I have some influence, I'll be honest on it, albeit little, but that's an area where I'm working, as Curtis said, with our hospital counterparts to really focus this. And I'm getting, wherever I can, the message out. That's got to be our number one focus. And when people ask me, Randy, what do you need? I would never turn down money for more resources. I'm going to be quite frank. Anybody on the phone, if you're willing to give us more money, we're more than happy in that side. But really what we have to do is get our resources out of the hospital. So I hope that answers your question, Jason.
It does. And I appreciate that information. I guess, like, if I could, so, like, but you specifically tell the people, like, hey, you might be a lower priority, just so, like, if it's a broken leg or something, they might maybe could drive to the hospital themselves or get a ride, themselves. So they know that they're not, maybe going to be seeing somebody anytime soon. Yeah,
we do. And then there's also a scenario where if the patients ask, where the ambulance is coming from, we will give from when the unit is dispatched, we will tell them from which community it's coming from. In Calgary, per se, we go with a quadrant of the city so that people know, so they get an idea around timelines.
Okay.
We're trying to be as transparent as possible. There is risk, right, in certain situations where people go to transport themselves. But again, they have to weigh the situation of based on where they sit, right, from
Yeah.
the event. So,
Okay. Well, thank you very much for answering my questions. And again, thank you for the work that you're doing on this. I appreciate it.
thank you, sir. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I'll turn now to Councillor Langley.
Thank you, Your Worship. And Randy, it's good to see you. I had the opportunity to chat with you up at the last AUMA conference, so it's good to see you again here. And thank you so much for taking the time to come chat with us this evening. EMS Resources is something that's a significant concern to me in our community. So tonight, I'm afraid I have more questions and concerns than I have time. So I'll try and stick to the main ones, main questions I have for you. The first one I have is in regards to the table on page 9, looking at the response times. These are only for Delta and Echo incidents. So these are life and limb calls.
Correct. Yes.
What does the data look like for non-Delta and Echo calls? For our Omega Deltas, our emergency hospital transfers, our as Councillor Wagner spoke to, our seniors who need a hand, who maybe it's not exactly an emergency, but it's an emergency to them. What are our response times looking for responses as a whole?
Yeah, I don't have the, Councillor, thank you for the comments and the question. I don't have the data available. So we would have to pull based on our Alpha through Charlie for events, the other determinants, the lower priority determinants. As far as our benchmarks, being completely transparent, we're benchmarked against our life-threatening, and that's what we report on for all our communities. We can get the data. It's a significant data pool, but if that's what your team would like, I'd be more than happy to do it. It's going to take some time though today, so I don't have it available with me to report on.
Okay, that would be data that I would be interested in receiving, just to understand the fuller picture, because not all calls are Delta or Echo calls, but that to the person who's calling, that doesn't necessarily matter to them. And then I have one more question about this slide, and that's for these times, is this when an actual truck arrives, or is this based on when one of the PRUs arrive?
It's a great question. It's from the time the 911 call is placed, so the last ring of the 911 call, until a unit is arrived on scene.
So a unit could be a paramedic response unit, a PRU unit, not an actual truck.
Yeah. It's not necessarily an ambulance. Well, in most often in your case in the town, it's an ambulance, because we don't have PRUs unless a supervisor resource is coming in. Rob, maybe you can comment. Do you have PRUs available at this point?
Hi, thanks, Randy. No, we don't have PRUs available, or that we do have a couple of vehicles, and from time to time, our management team may go out and assist crews, but as far as an actual resource that's dispatched, unlike the city where they have multiple PRU units that become a resource, our 2 supervisor vehicles aren't in the active matrix of doing that.
Thanks, Rob. I appreciate it. Councillor, does that answer your question?
That does. Thank you.
Okay.
Going on to the current challenges and mitigation strategies, I heard you talk about a couple of pilot programs that have gone on in Edmonton, specifically around IFT discharge transport options, and I believe the Integrated Operations Center has been piloted in Edmonton as well. What's the data showing on this? Is there data showing that there's an improvement in the Edmonton area? Because from what I've heard, there's still a good concern in the Edmonton area as well, even with these 2 programs operating.
Yeah, I'm going to pass this over to Curtis, and I'll just preface it with we will talk on both issues for you. Curtis will start with the IOC, and because he's the lead on this project for Calgary. What I can tell you is the challenge we have in Edmonton is primarily looking at input with their IOC, compared to what we're looking at is all 3 components. The flow into the hospital, throughput and output. Over to you, Curtis. I'll let you respond to that question.
Thanks, Randy. Yeah, the IOC, the Integrated Operations Center, like I said, is the eye in the sky. We have something similar for EMS. We call it an RTOC in Calgary. It's basically that air traffic control. You're correct. Edmonton has started this trial a little while ago with what Randy said is focus on input and then throughput and output. When we're looking at in the Calgary zone, because we don't have as many hospitals to transport to, we're really looking at the accountability of input, throughput, and output all at the same time. We need the flow in the system. We need to have more efficiencies in getting patients out of the hospital so they can move through the hospital. So Integrated Operations Center is a hospital. It's an initiative done with the hospital, and we're added to it. It's not our main initiative. I'm representing EMS to help build it. And we've just watched a presentation down in Baltimore, as they have an Integrated Operations Center, which they have some YouTube videos on it as well. If you want to see what it is, it's basically, picture it as a couple people in the room with lots of screens, trying to get real-time data, trying to get forecasting, trying to come up with solutions when areas are struggling. And again, looking at it not from just one site, because everyone does a great job at looking at their own site. And we want to take almost a 10,000-foot view and look at it. And how can we help out the system to create the flow in the system? And so that's for the Integrated Operations Center. On the transfer, the alternative transfer, so that pilot project started at Peter Lougheed Hospital at 3 different units. And then, sorry, it wasn't Edmonton, it was the North Zone that they just moved out to it. And again, this is looking at for the non-patient right now. If we call to do a transfer, it can be someone just going home, because it's an easy way for them to get that patient back to their home. And what we're saying is, because of how busy we are, if it doesn't need medical care, we'll do the ones with medical care. But is there another way to do it? Can they call family? Can they call a taxi? What we saw at the Peter Lougheed Hospital, and think of it, it's not huge numbers, but it's big enough numbers that out of the 3 units, they average 6 alternative transports a month, which might not seem lots, but when we take this to the whole entire zone, that's going to free up our interfacility transfers to keep the flow in the system. And so this one, we meet with the Calgary sites tomorrow, and then we meet with suburban rural executive directors to see how we're going to roll this out into suburban rural, into the entire Calgary zone. Did that answer your questions, Councillor?
It did. I'm just wondering, just along the data, like, is there data available showing that this is working in the Edmonton area where it's been piloted for a little bit longer than down here at Peter Lougheed?
Yeah, I don't have exact data from as they went through their 1 year. They just doing their presentation to collect it. We do know it's, like I said, it's a little different when you have 8 sites that you can transport to. You can really you can move patients around, saying go to this hospital, and so you're basically doing a better job at load leveling. We have challenges. We can't load level as much in Calgary because we only have the 4 sites. So, but if you look at the data from the Baltimore IOC, that saw significant decreases in emergency inpatients, saw significant increases in discharge. So the data that came out of there is significant. It was enough for us to say, let's take a look at it, right? And again, how do we come up with solutions when when people have challenges? We want to be able to help with solutions from from the 10,000-foot view.
Right. Thank you. And
So just, Councillor, if I may, just to add to that, I just want to be clear. We're talking 2 different things, because I think there may be some confusion here. So let's talk about the transfer options, the alternative transport options. That was piloted over the summer and into the fall at the Peter Lougheed. About a month ago, it just moved up to the north for a trial. So we don't have the rural data yet. We have the urban data. I took it upon myself to say the data was sufficient enough that we would see benefit. So I've provided direction to my teams that we want to move it across the entire zone. And in fact, in fairness, the hospital group is actually looking for this because they also see the challenges with EMS based on the amount of time we've been talking to them. And they're saying, yes, we want those options. They default to EMS because it's easy, right? You know, call EMS and most of the time we're showing up on time, right? But in this scenario, we're saying if it requires patient care, we're going to be there for you. But if it doesn't, if it's just requiring a transport vehicle, we need to look for alternatives. We're just too busy to continue that type of work anymore.
Thank you. And then the last, just in interest of trying to keep it brief, my last point is more just a comment, and that's hearing that the hiring is mainly focusing, not necessarily here in Strathmore, but across the province, it's mainly focusing on replenishing resources that we have lost is very concerning to me, because that means that we have workers that are burnt out. We have paramedics that are giving up on what they're doing because it's unsustainable for them. And I'm glad to hear that we're replenishing them, but if we can't retain them, then that's a huge concern. You know, we can hire 200 this year, but if we can't keep them for any more than a year, then I'm not sure we're much further ahead. And that's a real concern for me. Mainly, for many reasons, for their well-being, but also because, the work you do, the work these folks on the ground do is incredibly important, and they need to be at their, there's not much room for a bad day. So we need to care for them deeply as workers and as employees and as resources in our community. It's a big concern for me that it's just rehiring. And also I noticed that in the plan, and I understand that there are budgetary constraints and you can only do so much with the money that you have. But I did notice that in the plan, there is no plan for additional ambulances, no plan for additional trucks. So we may be getting more boots on the ground, and whether they're full-time or casual, hopefully mostly full-time, because I know that the casual can be pretty difficult on them. Sometimes the answer is more trucks. And that's, I know that you are working with the budget you have, but that's something that's deeply concerning to me, is that we're not seeing, we're seeing a 30% call increase. We're not seeing any more resources literally on the road. Hopefully we will with more crews being available, but even then, just making that statement. And again, thank you for the work that you do. Please don't take these questions or concerns too harshly. It's an issue that's close to my heart and something that I'm very concerned about. And I really appreciate you coming here tonight and speaking to our community. I really appreciate it.
You're welcome. Thank you, Councillor. I'm just going to do, Mr. Mayor, if it's okay, I'll respond briefly to what the Councillor said. So first of all, let's talk about the health and well-being of our staff. So I, like you, am deeply concerned. We have employee of family assistance programs available to our staff. We are seeing the highest workman's comps claims that we've ever seen in EMS, and that is deeply concerning to us, to the point we've got psychologists now on staff to support our staff. We've got a reintegration program available, so when we do start getting these people back, they come back into the work environment on a gradual basis so that they can acclimatize. We're doing work around resilience training to support them. So we have a lot of employee support programs available to staff, but it's difficult. To your question about the vehicles, I'm going to put it into perspective, and it won't be a surprise to anybody here, because if you went to get a new truck, you'll understand what I'm talking about. We have $40 million set aside over the next 2 years to replace almost our entire fleets across the province, and we can't get ambulances. The backlog of the supply chain and the production lines are backlogged. It's also a chip problem, which we're challenged with. So we are slowly seeing these vehicles trickle in, but they're not at the rate we want, which is creating even further challenges for us because we're having to extend the length of our fleet even longer. And that increases our maintenance and operating costs, as everybody's aware. And then finally, to the hiring piece, you're correct. I have no new dollars to put on new resources. Quite frankly, that's where we are lobbying for new resources, and hopefully with the conversations that are going on with the Provincial EMS Advisory Committee, we'll be able to access some of that, or at least make our case forward again in another manner. But you're correct. I'm talking about what I have available to me today. That's what we're trying to maximize. So your comments are appreciated, and please understand we don't take it as anything. We need to hear from you. We need to hear the concerns, and we appreciate it. So thank you for your time. Back to you, Your Worship. Sorry.
Thank you. I'll turn now to Councillor Peterson.
Thank you, Your Worship. Following up from Councillor Langley's comments, and as my fellow councillor, Councillor Wiley would say, for people at home, there's a context in Wood-EMSA and in our community that I think is quite unique, and I think that there are lots of people that might not necessarily be aware that prior to 2009, that there was a mill rate, a per capita charge that persons in the Wheatland County contributed to, and so we had an ambulance service that was under the purview of Wood-EMSA. And paramedics have experienced significant changes, huge changes in their profession, beginning with the homogenization of EMS provincial departments into the provincial healthcare model in 2009. And then again in 2016 with their inclusion into the Alberta Health Professions Act. If my dates are off, I know that CAO Whitty will correct me. I think that in those days when Wood-EMSA was running their own system, there was a very different reality for this community, and that's what people remember. In those early days in 2014, 2015, I remember attending a Wheatland Regional Partnership meeting with representatives from the homogenized EMS process. And one of the comments that was hardwired into my brain was that this will not cause a degradation of service. So long before COVID, we were told that the process into that homogenization would not cause a degradation of service. So prior to COVID, what EMSA was in conversations because of the degradation to the local service. It was significant. And then with the onset of COVID, the things that had happened in our own locale made me want to go to the research, to the science, and to hear the people who were in the front lines and to what was happening there. And the e-proxy sites in the province of Alberta in the university research started to produce some pretty profound information. And one of the ones that really stood out to me was that in the first couple waves of COVID, that there was a 60% increase in the numbers of patients accessing EMS because they didn't want to go to emergency wards, and that in and of itself created a huge issue. And that information came out of the CMAJ journal. And then I guess what that brings me to then is that crisis that we've hit today, and the province striking this new EMS committee. I'm wondering, my first question then is, what is, can you talk to the mandate of that committee and when we can expect feedback around that? And then I want to circle back to the comment that was made to this council just now about cost of trucks and upkeep and whatnot. And I just want to say that when Wood-EMSA was operating under a mill rate system, that was not usually an option or not usually a problem. And so now my kids would say to me, yeah, that was then and this is now. And this is an old person's context. But I really want to heighten this idea that, history can be informative, and what worked before could work again, maybe not under the exact same model, but it's worth taking a look and it's worth revisiting. whatever the process is. And my concerns relate to what happened in this community and what will happen in the future. And I guess that my final thing is that once this EMS committee, this provincial committee gives its feedback, and there are some substantive changes I understand coming, one of those substantive changes that I would like to see, because we know that the frequency and distribution of patients that are accessing EMS services have changed. And one of the things that I would really like, that I would really hope for the future, in addition to the IOCs and the in situ processes that are happening in emergency wards and trauma centers, that there would be further research, that could possibly mitigate the impact of future pandemics, because we really, really need to be in a better situation in the next wave or the next pandemic or the next time, if we're going to see 61% increases in patients accessing EMS services and not going directly to emergency wards to access this because they are afraid of greater transmission. And thank you, Your Worship. That's all I have.
Thank you. Any comments, gentlemen, on when we might hear back from this committee that's been struck?
Your Worship, I believe a interim report is supposed to be to the minister by May. I can't comment beyond this. This is not an EMS initiative. It's a Government of Alberta initiative. We are a stakeholder, much like your groups are stakeholders. So it is my understanding that at the end of May, there is supposed to be an interim report with, I believe, by the end of June, the final report to the group. What I can tell you is that there's the steering committee, which is led by the 2 MLAs, and then there are 5 subcommittees under that are doing the work related to engagement and doing that. The numbers are quite small, as you can imagine, because they want to get some immediate stuff in place, both short, intermediate, and long-term goals and objectives that they can bring forward to government. So I really can't comment, Councillor, much further than that, in Your Worship, because again, this is not an EMS initiative. It's about EMS, but it's driven by the Government of Alberta.
So Your Worship, a follow-up question. So my understanding was that your community engagement process was directly related to this.
My community engagement.
That this community engagement process that we're engaged in tonight had a relational component to this committee, to this EMS provincial committee.
Thanks, Councillor. It's my understanding we've been doing these community engagements, restarting them since I would say the summer of last year, and it wasn't related to this. I wasn't given the mandate to come out and speak to you today. This is actually EMS taking the initiative ahead of all of this work. So that's all I can comment on.
So then it would just really appear that the left hand and the right hand are not working together and not talking to each other.
Sorry, Councillor, that's your opinion. I can't really comment.
I understand that you can't comment, and it is absolutely my opinion.
Yep. So I'm not going to comment any further. Thank you.
Thank you. One quick comment just before we let you folks go is, and I'm wondering, and it's this basically, I'm wondering if we could have you folks back maybe towards the end of Q2, and we can see how that new system is working as far as the times out and the calls to Calgary and the response times. Would that be something you folks could be able to do?
Yeah, Your Worship, when is Q2? Sorry, I just
end of June. Would that
end of June? Oh yes, yeah, we can come out and we'd love to visit with you. Hopefully, restrictions are lifted and we can see you in person.
Yeah, and Rob, we'd love to have you a part of that from Wentwood Ems as well. I think it'd be a good way for us to circle back and see how things are going with your new approaches.
Okay. Mr. Mayor, would you have your group reach out on some dates for us? And sure. We'd be more than happy to arrange to come out. And I would like to do it in person if that's possible. I'm hoping, given this, let's pray that we can be out in person, and then we can continue to build the relationships.
Yeah, that would be great. I'm hoping we'll be able to do that as well by June. And I think our legislative team is already nodding their heads and they're ready to roll on that, getting the information out to you. Councillor Peterson.
Thank you, Worship. I have a last request of CAO Whitty, and that is that I think it would be beneficial to our council and to people that have tuned in and will tune in later because of the great interest in this, for him to speak briefly to the changes in the Core Flex program and what he has undertaken in this to just give a little bit of an overview of that, if he would mind, if you're okay with that, Rob.
Yeah, thanks, Councillor Peterson. Right now, we're still in the, I guess, sort of negotiation stages with Alberta Health Services on their proposed changes for us. As Randy alluded to, we're looking at, as you know, being on our board, Denise, our one car is assembled 12-hour crew at an ALS level. Our other two are Core Flex. So our go forward plan, and again, we're in, I guess, still planning stages with that. We're hoping that we can get that underway soon. Our second car will be as well an assembled crew, 12-hour shifts with no on-call. And our third crew will be the peak time car Monday to Friday. We're just working through, and hopefully by next week, we'll have that information into AHS. Obviously, they've asked for a fair bit of work on our pro forma and costs associated with that. Once that's submitted, I imagine they have some sort of a process and get back to us. We're really, trying to get this streamlined and fast-tracked, because obviously our crews have been suffering for a long time on this Core Flex, and that hasn't been, any secret. We've reported on that for many years now. So this is a huge step forward. I certainly think with the other initiatives of the dispatch and even the soft rollout a couple of weeks ago, we've seen profound differences in our crews being available in this community. I think Curtis spoke to, 6 weeks ago, we were in there 70 sometimes in 1 week, and we're down to like less than 10. So that's had profound changes so far. And I'm really hoping that now that the actual rollout happened this past Monday, that we continue to see that, and we'll have, definitely have more resources in the community, and that will ultimately affect the time and percentage, both 50 and 90th percentile response times within our community when we have resources available and they're assembled, because it certainly is a big improvement. So outside of that, I'm not sure what else you'd like to know. I'd be happy to answer. We're not there yet. As Randy said, it will mean additional resources here for us, and that's, I want it to be, it's not additional, or he's not looking at adding resources to his overall budget, but by changing this shifting change out of the hours of work project that was released, this will mean 2 additional full-time positions for Wheatland EMS, and for that we're grateful, and I really think that with these changes, and again, it's phase 1, and they will look at the data, they put it into policy, look at it yearly, and analyze it, and going forward, maybe we'll see more positive changes. So your comments were great earlier. I think we certainly have seen a large change from the way it used to be to the way it is now. And going forward, I'm very hopeful and optimistic that a lot of these initiatives that AHS, EMS is putting forward will certainly help. And again, mitigating huge call volume increases that I don't think any of us predicted pre-pandemic, but prior to that, we still had lots of issues. And this hours of work thing, hours of work project, and the results and some take home pieces that will certainly add beneficial resources into our community. And I'm looking forward to hopefully having some really good news going forward.
Thank you, CAO Whitty. I really appreciate that. And I just want to pass on our deep regard for you and the whole WODEMSA organization. We understand something, not all, but something of what you have encountered in these last years, and the response that you brought to this community has been heroic and deeply appreciative. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Peterson. Councillor Langley.
Thank you, Your Worship. I have one question just remaining for CAO Whitty, and that's it ties back to my concern for the well-being of our paramedics and ensuring that they have access to the mental health resources that they need to stay healthy for work. And I mean, the focus should really be on preventing them needing those resources. But what I want to ask you, CAO Whitty, is do the crews here in Strathmore have the same access to mental health resources like psychologists and whatever supports they need to support themselves? Do they have the same access to the resources here in Strathmore as they would across the rest of the province?
Yeah, thank you, Councillor, for that question. We have employee and family assistance program. It's not the same because we're a contracted provider. We have our own. It's a little bit different from what the core AHS group has. Ours is quite robust. In fact, we have two programs, one that recently launched from our other benefit provider that we have. Unfortunately, being as small as we are, we certainly don't have a psychologist on staff, but we certainly have the ability for our staff to reach out to these employee and family assistance programs. And through that, they can certainly see and have psychological and psychiatric type care. It's certainly being used. We get a report yearly. We get zero as far as any pertinent information, but our use in that is definitely up. I just got our latest year, and it's been more utilized this year than it ever has in the past. So yeah, there certainly are the resources, whether they're maybe as robust as what they have there. I would challenge that they're similar on a smaller scale, but certainly the access and our crews are seeing the same thing that every EMS provider and caregiver across Alberta gets. And we've gone above and beyond that and had a little bit of an initiative for retention and recruitment that is specific to us, and that certainly has gone a long way. So our board of directors from the Ems board have been tremendously supportive of our staff and our service here. So second to none, I think we're well looked after.
Thank you very much. That calms my heart a bit to know that there is support there, and I would hope that you would have access to everything you could possibly need. Please pass along my regards to your crews and thank them for the work that they do here, and thank you for the work that you do as well.
Thank you, and I'll be certain to pass it along. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Langmead. Thank you to the EMS staff who came today. We really appreciate your presentation and being forthright in your ability and willingness to answer questions. And we look forward to circling back and revisiting this, hearing from you an update at the end of Q2. And thank you, Rob, for representing WDEMSA. And as usual, you're very clear in your responses. And I am very happy to see some happiness and optimism on your face tonight. So thank you for being here, and we'll invite you back for Q2 report as well.
Thank you, Worship. I appreciate being invited.
Thank you. Good night,
Thank you,
everybody.
Your Worship. Yep. Thank you for everything. Take care.
Thank you. And this brings us to item 6. We have no consent agenda, so we go on to 7, confirmation of minutes. 7.1, regular council meeting minutes for February 2nd, 2022. I have I think I saw Deputy Mayor Montgomery's hand.
Thank you. Yeah, I'll move the minutes from the February 2nd meeting as presented.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. We have a motion on the floor to adopt those minutes, to accept them. All in favor? And that motion is carried. We have no tabled items tonight. We have no items or reports from administration. Item 10, we have committee reports. Are there any committee reports tonight? Seeing and hearing none. We have no items directly related to council. That brings us to item 12, bylaws. 12.1, non-residential municipal tax incentive bylaw number 22-03, which is on page 21. And is administration, Jamie, are you speaking to this, just a preamble at the start?
Yes, Your Worship, I'll be presenting a short report on the bylaw.
Okay, thank you.
So good evening, Your Worship and Council. Tonight I'll be presenting an overview of the proposed non-residential municipal tax incentive bylaw 2203, which staff is recommending be given 3 readings this evening. On November 27th, 2021, Council directed staff to bring forward some business initiatives that could attract additional economic development to the town of Strathmore. And further, on December 15th, 2021, administration did bring forward a proposed tax incentive bylaw that was given first reading. Subsequent to that, the administration did take that bylaw through a legal review by our legal counsel. There was many technical changes that come back from legal, and while those changes were several, they didn't really affect the purpose and intent of the bylaw, but we did feel it was cleaner and simpler to bring forward a brand newly drafted bylaw, which is 2203 that's before you tonight. These changes were to add some definitions to the bylaw. They added clarity around linear assessments. They removed the requirement for an agreement on the tax rebate. And they also added an example of what the rebate would look like in terms of how it would be calculated. And again, none of the eligibility thresholds around investment amounts, total of people employed at that business, or the square footage were changed. This tax incentive bylaw will allow the town to share the risk of those who wish to invest significant business capital in the community. So in terms of background, and this is going to be a little bit repetitive from my previous presentation to all of you, but the province passed Bill 7 in 2019, and this provided the flexibility to municipalities to offer tax rebates for up to 15 years to businesses setting up in commercial and industrial spaces. A property tax incentive again shows risk sharing between the municipality and that business. And it's important to balance these tax risks, or these risks rather, with the benefits that that are provided by the significant non-residential development in the longer term. And while the town is competitive on its base tax rates and doesn't tax machinery and equipment, additional incentives may be needed to ensure that we're continuously attractive moving forward. In terms of strategic analysis, desire for economic growth and major investments needs to be balanced with fiscal and community impacts. Non-residential investment is critical to our long-term future, and incentives will have an impact on the town's budget and will result in some lost revenue depending on their magnitude. In terms of the bylaw itself, it has elements outlining the criteria for the projects to qualify, and these are around that initial investment being at least $10 million, create a full-time employment for at least 25 individuals on site, and comprise at least 2,800 square meters, or about 30,000 square feet in one level of the development. This redemption is calculated by first determining the total increase in the tax assessment from the base year, and then calculating a percentage of that corresponding increase, which will be refunded back to the applicant. And it's at a sliding scale that goes from 100% in year 1 and then reducing by 20% every year until year 5, after which, of course, they would pay the full tax amount once the program is completed. The total tax levy for the town is typically around $13 million per year. And so an increased investment, for example, of $20 million assessment, rebate of about $100,000, $150,000 in year 1 of the program would equate to about 1.2% of that total tax in a year. Over 5 years, the total tax rebate would approach about $500,000 for an increased assessment of $20 million. In developing the initiatives, again, staff wanted to be sure that any incentives to future new businesses and expansions would not severely impact the existing tax base or ratepayers. The result is a measured incentive that should provide overall benefit to the long term in the community in the form of increased assessment, of course, and valuable employment. This incentive will improve the overall viability of the community in the long run and will continue to support Strathmore as a key service node in the region. Overall, these incentives, or this incentive rather, will be limited in terms of impact on individual residents and businesses, while providing large impacts to the community in the longer term. It's important that Strathmore remains competitive in the pursuit of these non-residential investments. And other jurisdictions have implemented similar incentives in the past 2 to 3 years. So in conclusion, we've developed this bylaw to encourage non-residential development in the town. This will make the town more attractive to those large non-residential developments that would provide many benefits in the long term, including new jobs and increased tax revenue. Major investments will give Strathmore a regional advantage for new opportunities in sectors such as agribusiness and agri-technology. And while the town's competitive with several municipalities currently, the measured incentive package will demonstrate council's willingness again to share some of that risk with potential investors moving forward. So that concludes my presentation. I'll answer any questions any of you may have. Thank you.
Thank you, Jamie. Thank you for all the work you and your staff have done in bringing the report to us and in bringing the bylaw as well. Are there questions? I have Deputy Mayor Montgomery with the first questions.
Thank you. And I have a motion ready as well, but I could ask a question, I guess. So my question just has to do with sections 10.2B and 9.3. And it just has to do with the timeline that will be given to people. Sorry, let me just pull that up here. It just talks about an assessed person may appeal a decision of a tax exemption to council in the following situations. Sorry. So it says a request for appeal must be received by the CAO by the date stated in the decision under section 9.3. And then it just kind of refers in 9.3 to it says a written decision to cancel an exemption must be provided to the applicant and must include reasons for the cancellation, identify the taxation year or years to which the cancellation applies, and provide the date by which an application for an appeal to council must be made. So this is just for, like, I guess, general information. Like, how long of a timeline should somebody expect, I guess, for something like that?
Through the chair, initially this was actually identified, I believe, in the first version of this bylaw, or the earlier bylaw was identified, I believe, at 30 days. The legal counsel's advice was to kind of not put a time period in there because it's sometimes you get confusion over mailing time when something was posted things. So she suggested we just put a date in there. And so I guess my short answer would be, it would probably be around 30 days. That's a typical time. So we would take whatever date that decision was and add 30 calendar days. That way it's really clear and specific to the applicant.
Okay. And that was my only question. Everything looks good otherwise. Thank you.
Thank you. And I'll come back to you, Deputy Mayor, for your motion for first reading. Question from Councillor Wegener. Councillor Wegener, have you frozen? It looks like you have. Oh, there you're back. Okay.
I think I'm back now. Jamie, thank you for you and the admin team for looking after this and developing this. A couple of questions. First question, you mentioned that this just recently came into effect, but towns of our size who have implemented these tax incentives, do you have any data or any knowledge of it paying off for them?
Through the chair, the Bill 7 is relatively new. I know that in my research, several places in Alberta have done it. It's quite common in Saskatchewan as well, although I'm sure it's different, but municipalities even smaller than ours have implemented, but I don't have any data on how that's paid off. And I would suggest that it would probably be pretty hard to measure in this short period of time, but I'm not sure if Councillor CAO Scobel would have anything to add there.
No, I don't have any examples either that I can think of.
Okay, and I figured it would kind of be a difficult question, and that on page 35 of 55, the last paragraph states, taxes are not refundable until a development or expansion is fully complete and a development permit and building permit have been issued. To me, that's kind of backwards. Would the development and building permit be issued prior to the development or expansion being fully complete?
Through the chair, we just, that was written in to make sure that the developer or the business followed through on their commitments in terms of the actual development and was open and operating. If that wasn't, there wouldn't be a lot of benefit, and I think this is where you're coming from. There wouldn't be a lot of benefit in a person buying a piece of land and then applying for this because there wouldn't be a huge change in assessment. So we want to make sure those improvements are completed to get the biggest change in that assessment to measure, to qualify, and then give them a more significant rebate. So that's kind of how that is worded.
Okay, thank you for that. And just one more question. If page 36 of 35. So properties licensed under Gaming Liquor and Cannabis Act are not eligible. Can you explain that to me? It kind of makes sense, but it doesn't.
Through the chair, I think we included that to just limit. We wanted to be pretty focused in terms of the types of businesses we attract here. This was structured to attract large, I'd say mostly industrial development. So we wanted to kind of try to exclude a lot of those things that weren't. So that's really all I can offer there.
And that's kind of what I was thinking. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Councillor Wagner. I have Councillor Wiley. Oh, sorry, I have Councillor Peterson and then Councillor Langley and then back to Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Jamie. In this really thorough report, I have only one small question that actually came from someone who was reading the report, and they asked on the definitions in P and Q under improvements, and they asked if you could speak to what's looked at when you're doing an improvement assessment. If you could just briefly speak to that.
Through the chair, yeah. So I guess what we don't want to include is a change in assessment in just land. So what we include in assessment is an improvement assessment would be the building, a new building, any significant renovation, and then any machinery and equipment. Now, I do want to clarify, we don't tax machinery and equipment, but we do have to assess it. So we would assess all those improvements, and then you calculate the tax to remove the tax, calculate the taxes to remove the machinery equipment after. Sorry.
And that's a very important consideration, that process, that you do not tax equipment, right? Like that's huge,
quite important. Yeah.
Huge advantage for large industrial interests. Thank you very much. Yeah, very much appreciated.
Thank you, Councillor Peterson, Councillor Langmaid, and then Deputy Mayor Montgomery.
Thank you, Your Worship. I have just a very quick and hopefully easy question regarding the employment. So I understand that any business that wants to apply for the exemption will need 25 full-time employees. And I can see here on the last page of the document that we're looking at, page 37 of 55, it says successful applicants will agree to provide the town of Strathmore with relevant employment and financial information to track program success. So what does the process look like for the town ensuring that the business who is applying and is receiving this exemption is maintaining their employment at or above 25 full-time positions?
Through the chair, to be fair, we are still working through some of the implementation details. Okay. But I think what we would probably look at is maybe an annual report or an annual, sharing of information that just kind of confirms they still have those 25 individuals employed. And of course, that information would be redacted to the extent that there'd be no information there that we don't need in terms of personal information and privacy.
Perfect, thank you. And just to clarify, it's 25 full-time individuals, not 25 FTEs. So they could have, people working, 50 people working half-time. No, we want 25 full-time positions. Perfect, thank you very much. Those were my only questions. I appreciate all the work you've done on this, and I think it looks really strong. Thank you.
Thank you, it was a team effort.
Thank you. Deputy Mayor Montgomery.
Thank you very much. I will move that council give first reading the bylaw number 22-03, being the non-residential municipal tax incentive bylaw.
Thank you. We have a motion for first reading. All in favor? And the motion is carried. Okay, Deputy Mayor Montgomery again.
Thanks. I'll move second reading for bylaw number 22-03.
Thank you. And now that we have a motion on the floor for second reading, is there any discussion on this motion? Deputy Mayor Montgomery.
Thanks. I just wanted to say, I support this bylaw. I think that this is a good idea in many ways. This is a way that the town, many people are interested in the town taking on a role of economic development, and this is a direct way that the town can invest and actually not spend any money, and still kind of attract businesses here. So, and large businesses as well. So, if this has the effect that we're hoping, we could see a lot of things, really improve in the near future. Thank you very much.
Thank you for that, Deputy Mayor. Councillor Wiley.
Yeah, I love this bylaw. I love how competitive this bylaw is. It makes us an attractive municipality for major capital investments. It's the second time as council we've talked about it. I received no negative feedback from anybody after the first one. Did any other councillors receive anyone questioning, wondering what we were doing? Like, I think there was some concern, maybe some other major capital non-residential developers might see this as unfair, but from what we've heard, there's no one else that would have met this criteria since this new law was created. So I'm very much looking forward to supporting it.
Thank you, Councillor Wiley. Councillor Peterson. I think you're on mute.
Sorry, I just put my hand down, Your Worship, because Councillor Wiley captured it perfectly. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm excited by this bylaw too. I think it gives us a great chance to be competitive in the region, and it's something Strathmore needs, is to attract large industry if possible. So I'm on board with this. So we have a motion on the floor for second reading, and I'll call the question. All in favor? And the motion is carried. Councillor Wiley.
I was dying to get in there. I would like to give the unanimous consent to a third and final reading of bylaw 22-03, being the non-residential municipal tax incentive bylaw.
Thank you for that motion. You've all heard the motion. All in favor? And the motion is carried. Councillor Peterson.
Your Worship, I would move that council give third and final reading to bylaw number 22-03, being the non-residential municipal tax incentive bylaw.
And thank you for that motion. I will call the question. All in favor? And the motion is carried. That brings us to 12.2, lot grading bylaw number 22-02, which is found on page 38 of your agenda package. And Ethan Wilson, you are presenting and speaking to this one. Good evening and welcome.
Yes, thank you. Good evening, Your Worship and Council. Bylaw 22-02, the lot grading bylaw, is being brought forward tonight as a new initiative, which creates a database for regularly occurring issue that we have here in town. The lot grading permit will require a home builder to confirm their compliance with the designated drainage patterns and grade requirements for their community. The solution is seen as one in which a minimal impact and minimal cost while setting a process for future success. If council has any questions on bylaw 2202, I'd be happy to answer them. The hope from administration is to get all three readings tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Ethan. Questions, Deputy Mayor Montgomery?
Yes, thank you. So my question, I just wanted to kind of clarify, I guess. So first of all, like only where the actual grade is being changed, are they responsible for changing the grade? Like, so if they're not, as part of the project or not, touching kind of the existing grade, we're not going to turn around and say, hey, you actually have to slope the entire property this way or something.
Your Worship, through the chair. So with a new build, they're required to slope their lot as per the grade permit or the grade certificate that's been issued. So basically this process is confirming that they've done what they've committed to do. Yeah. The other portion of this is when the final grades are submitted, we want to know, are the neighboring properties already developed, Are they being developed or are they untouched? And that way we get a better understanding of, are they tying into existing grades that are never going to change? Or are they kind of setting the base grade that the next lot will have to tie into?
Because what I'm kind of like thinking about specifically is, so it also includes industrial properties, and it says, if you want to build, any building on an industrial property. And so I'm kind of thinking about, like if there's already, an existing business there and they want to build some small outbuilding, it's like at that point, they're not touching anything else. They're just kind of building, like a slab on grade or something like that. It's like, are we going to say, hey, by the way, you have to, kind of slope your property to our, or are we just going to kind of say, okay, well, yeah, it's not really affecting anything as far as the grade or the slope, so we're not going to make you do anything?
Your worship, through the chair and councillor, you've pretty much got it correct. I mean, if in the scenario where you're adding something to an existing development, if there's no known issues, we're not going to ask for changes. If the proposal that's coming in isn't significantly higher or significantly lower than the existing grade, then we would just be asking for confirmation that the grades effectively haven't changed. Okay, and so even if they haven't touched the grade, then they still have to get it surveyed at the end? Correct. Okay, I see. And the other question I had, sorry, if I just have one more, if that's okay. It just has to do with the slopes and grades for soils. It says I think 2% for soils and concrete. I was under the impression that soils might need to be sloped a bit more than just 2%. Your worship, it will depend lot by lot. Again, it goes back to the grade slip that would be issued for that site. We look as 2% as a minimum. Okay. The last thing we want to create is either flat spots or back sloping towards a building. So 2% would be the minimum. Okay, I see. All right. Thank you very much, Ethan.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Montgomery. Councillor Wiley and then Councillor Peterson.
Hi, one thing I've heard from residents of Strathmore is that we have a lot of red tape that's put on businesses. I'm wondering, is this a comparable bylaw to things that are in other communities?
Your worship, through the chair, we did take some information from other communities. I can't say specifically if one has the exact same bylaw. Where this kind of originated is we've had a lot of complaints or issues which have been brought to the town over the past few years in terms of my neighbor's stormwater is entering my property, that sort of concern. And under our current land use bylaw and no other bylaws that we have, the town really has zero enforcement ability when those situations arise. And we kind of turn into a mediator in terms of, this is a neighborly issue, we'd love to help, but there's only so much we can do. The intent of this bylaw is to have a bit of a record of day one situation. So in the future, we'll have this database of grades. And if that complaint comes to the town, the first thing that we can look at is, do the grades as they are at the time of complaint match the grades at the time of final build? And if there is a discrepancy, well, then the first thing that needs to be done is to fix those grades back to match what was done at the time of final build. So a little long-winded answer to your question, but it's a bit of an in-house bylaw that's been created.
So another question would be, typically I'm allergic to increasing costs on developers. What I think it does is it drives up costs and it actually makes our town less affordable to live in. This seems to me like to be pretty small extra costs. Like I see on page 39, an estimate of $20 for an extra permit, but then I was having trouble reading page 47. So I guess it's page 7 of 9 for you, or page 47 of our entire agenda package. Could you give me a sense of what that's adding then to a typical home build in town or a typical multi-family build in town?
Yep, your worship, through the chair to you, councillor. $20 is the example for a single home. So the thought is that's our most common build here in Strathmore. So that was the example provided in the report. So $20, it's a small amount. The hope is to recover some of the costs that are required just to issue the permit. And issuing the permit, we're going to tie this in with a standard development permit anyways, so it's not additional paperwork. and then reviewing the final survey as it comes in just to make sure it matches. The hope is that on staff's end, this is more than, or it's no more than a, few minutes to a half hour, depending on the site. And $20 is the reasonable amount to cover those costs without, getting outrageous. Of course, larger sites, we would be asking for more. And that's where this fee schedule comes in to kind of differentiate those fees based on the size of the site or how many buildings there are.
That actually really answers my red tape question too, because what you're saying is this is basically just another item on a permit that's already been filling out. So it's not like this is a whole new set of paperwork for a developer to have to do. It's just one more question basically that needs to be answered.
You are correct. So basically at this time, there's a permit application that happens already, either a development permit, building permit, or a combination of the two. And then afterwards, there's the issuance of a real property report or an RPR. So the thought process with this bylaw is that we're tying on the front end to the permit application that already happens, and we're tying on the back end to the RPR that already happens. We're just adding a couple of small steps to each process.
All right, thank you. That settles everything that was uncertain for me. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Wiley. And if I could just piggyback on his question, Ethan, when we have a building inspector checking out a house that's being built next to a neighbor, is it easy for an inspector? This is a logistical question. Is it easy for an inspector to tell if the grade isn't what we think it should be?
Your Worship, I would say an inspector would recognize an issue that's noticeable and easily recognized. The concern is that a lot of times when the inspector comes, landscaping isn't completed. And that's not what the inspector is typically looking at. So that's where that period of 12 months comes in with this permit, of giving them that time after final inspection to finalize their landscaping and then submit that final survey.
Okay, thank you very much. I'll go now to Councillor Peterson.
Thank you, Your Worship, and thank you, Ethan. Ethan, do we have a lot of places in town where stormwater would meet high water?
Sorry, Councillor, stormwater meeting high water. Can you explain?
Well, like I'm thinking about where downtown south is, downtown south was a slough bottom, so I'm thinking about that particularly. And I just was wondering if there were more areas in town that I know Lakewood has some issues as well.
Yeah. Your Worship, and to you, Councillor, Lakewood would be the example I would use.
Yeah.
Through their development, they've got other mitigation measures such as, under drains and sump pumps and those sort of things. But that would be the example I provide.
The reason that I really, really appreciated this, and I might be reading more into it, and you can tell me if I'm way off base, but once we have the data that you're amassing here, would this allow us to do some guidance modeling for the future and some risk assessment around further stormwater development in the community?
I think in the right hands, that data would absolutely be valuable, yes.
And of course, what I'm thinking about, Ethan, is looking towards, down the road to adopting a green stormwater infrastructure, I guess, is sort of where I'm headed. But I really appreciate that this is a really sound beginning that's long overdue for our community. Someone who lives in the slough bottom, I appreciate it. I'm grateful. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Peterson. I'll go to Councillor Wegener.
Ethan, thank you for this. Just one quick question, and I thought I read it in there, but this is just going for new builds, correct? It's not going to go back and look at existing homes.
You're correct, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Wegener. Councillor Langley.
Thank you. I just have a quick question of how this information will be available. So my thought process is that there's a new home built, say maybe 10 years down the road or sooner. A homeowner wants to do some landscaping and change their yard around. Will this information on the grading of the property be available to those landscapers so that they can ensure that they maintain what was initially in place? I'm thinking kind of more in terms of like avoiding an issue rather than just having the document to prove that there's an issue. Could we also use the documentation to prevent it?
Yes, Your Worship, and to you, Council, I think if anybody were to approach administration asking for guidance to avoid a situation, we'd help them out as much as we could.
So this data will be available to them if it's asked for. obviously.
Correct. I would make sure that they're the homeowner or representing the homeowner. We wouldn't provide data of somebody else's property, but yes.
Perfect, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Langley. Councillor Peterson.
Ready with a motion if you would entertain it, your worship.
I would love to entertain it.
I would move the council give first reading to bylaw number 22-02, being the lot grading bylaw.
Thank you. You've all heard the motion. All in favor? And the motion is carried. Deputy Mayor Montgomery.
Thank you. I'll move second reading of bylaw number 22-02.
That's right. Thank you.
Yeah.
Now that we have a motion for second reading, is there any discussion on this motion? And seeing and hearing none, I'll call the question. All in favor? And that motion is carried. Deputy Mayor Montgomery.
Thanks. I'll move unanimous consent of bylaw 22-02.
Thank you very much. There's the motion is on the floor now. All in favor? And that motion is carried. And we're looking for one final motion. Deputy Mayor Montgomery.
Thanks. I'll move final reading, third reading, and of bylaw 22-02.
Thank you very much. We have a motion for third and final reading. All in favor? And that motion is carried. We move now to item 12.3, supplementary assessment bylaw number 22-04. And Lisa Gregory is with us to present on this. Good evening, Lisa, and welcome.
Good evening. Thank you. Your Worship Council, we are asking you to pass the updated supplementary assessment bylaw. This allows our tax assessors to perform supplementary tax assessments for construction that is newly occupied or building improvements completed during the year. This is basically a housekeeping bylaw that is normally done every year. However, there is a change. The MGA now allows for it to remain in effect until it's rescinded. So that's the change in the bylaw. Does anyone have any questions?
Thank you. Did anyone's screen turn to post attendee Zoom? Or is it just me? Oh, there we are. Okay, I don't know what happened there. So I do have you back, all of you. Thank you for that presentation, Lisa. And I'll turn to the councillors if they have questions. Deputy Mayor Montgomery and then Councillor Wiley.
I just have a motion, so if Councillor Wiley wants to ask a question.
Councillor Wiley, do you have a question first?
Yeah, essentially, I'm just going to restate what Lisa said because I just want to be clarified. I found the report summary was just like there wasn't a ton of information in it. So I just want to restate my understanding of what you said. So this is already a bylaw that exists within our books, but each year it just needs to be renewed. But the MGA is now allowing us to just make it a permanent thing. And so we're not actually making any significant change at all, other than it just stays as it is.
Yes, you're correct. Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you, Councillor Wiley, for that clarification. That's good for the public at home too. Deputy Mayor Montgomery.
So I guess it's with great sadness and sorrow that I'll move first reading of bylaw 22-04 for the last time.
Thank you. We have a motion on the floor for first reading to bylaw number 22-04. All in favor? And that motion is carried. Councillor Peterson.
I move the council give second reading to bylaw number 22-04, being the supplementary assessment bylaw.
Thank you. And now that we have a motion on the floor for second reading, is there discussion on that motion? Seeing none, all in favor? And that motion is carried. Deputy Mayor Montgomery.
Thank you. It's with great pleasure that I will move for unanimous consent of bylaw 22-04.
Thank you. And that's for third and final reading. I'll call the question. All in favor? And that motion is carried. And one final motion.
Yeah, I'll move third reading of 2204, please.
Thank you. We have a motion for third and final reading. All in favor? And that motion is carried. Thank you, Lisa, for your presentation. We move on to item 13. There is no urgent business tonight. Item 14, questions between councillors and/or council statements. Seeing and hearing none. Item 50, no administrative inquiries. And now we are looking for a motion to go in camera. And if you could, I guess, Kara, do you need to state all of the different sections with the different FOIP sections? Do you have to, or just one of them is enough to go in camera?
I would recommend that you state all the sections that you're relying on to go in camera.
Okay, thank you. So we've removed 16.2. So councillors, if you make a motion to go in camera, if you could state both of the FOIP sections and the brackets. And Mark Pretzlaff is ready. Deputy Mayor Peterson, I almost took it away from Jason. Councillor Peterson, and you're muted right now, which I've always looked forward to.
You stop it. You've been doing a really good job, so just quit messing with it. I would move that council move in camera to discuss items related to sections 21, subsection 1A and 24(1) subsection A of the Freedom of Information Protection Privacy Act at 7:51 p.m.
Thank you very much. You've all heard the motion. All in favor? And we are going in camera at 7:51. And